Welcome to God with George Ortega. This is episode number 94. I'm recording it on Wednesday, March 3rd, 2021 at 5:43 p.m. Eastern Time. And so apparently God, just had me go through the list of topics that I've typed out to determine what to talk about today. But then, as I'm reading through the list, God is telling me, because again, I have to reiterate that the thoughts that are coming into my mind are all coming from God, either directly or indirectly. So apparently for this episode, God wants me to just to not plan any more than just, beginning to talk, introduce the show. And which is interesting because it makes this more difficult for me, because I'm so what to talk about. But I guess, so when we understand that we don't have a free will, that everything's up to God, the kinds of questions we ask become different. So I mentioned this before. If I were to ask myself, well, why isn't anything coming to mind? Or why haven't I chosen a topic? That'd be a different answer to that question than, well, why is God choosing to have me go through the show like this? And either, one thing to understand is that either way, it's a guess. We're only ever guessing at why we think we do things. And we can only ever guess at why we believe God is doing things. So, all right, so let's see. So, yeah, no, after 94 episodes, I guess I've been thinking, well, how much more is there to say about God? And maybe that's the wrong question. Maybe the right question is like, all right, so I've got this forum where I've gone through, I've gone through various episodes, kind of like logically explaining why God is more than a belief, why God must necessarily logically exist. And we've gone through some of the attributes. So it could be that God intends this episode to be more about my gaining new knowledge than imparting knowledge that I know, or at least asking questions that I'm familiar with. Because part of this is like, I remember, a while back I was going to do a series when the distancing just began, the social distancing. It's going to be about self-talk, how, talking to oneself can really help with the isolation, and so I began to do episodes of that, and it just became difficult to talk to myself on camera because it's difficult to not keep in mind that that this is being viewed by others, by someone else. So so I think with this, if I try to address God too directly in this, series also, it may be similar. I may, and it may be that God is asking me perhaps to, or not, I said ask me, God, again, God doesn't ask. If God wants me to do something, God just makes me do it. So maybe God wants me to experiment with this format, to maybe God wants me to talk to her, on this show, to give you an example, I guess, of because some people are not really so familiar with talking with God. And so now we've got a theme. So I didn't know what we were talking about. I know, sentence by sentence, the theme emerges. So yeah, I think a good way to present the benefits of talking to God is to talk to God, with God, on one of these episodes. And So, well, might as well try it. All right, so God, let's see. I gotta I want to go out, because I haven't been out yet. Maybe do some some food shopping, perhaps just a few items, not too much. And it's been a good day, so I appreciate the day. Um, let's see. Yeah, no, I'm looking forward to attending a Torah class later tonight. That should be good. But I really would like to take another nap. I think, I stayed up pretty late last night. I mean, I got enough sleep, I think, but I could use a nap. Actually, maybe that's what I'll do. You know, rather than going out, I can perhaps go out later after the class. Um, yeah, I'll probably do that because there are fewer people in the supermarkets really late anyhow, which is, so yeah, after this, I'm going to take a nap, which would be good. So this isn't, no, that, as I'm doing this, fine, it works if I'm taking a walk and verbalizing my thoughts or talking to God in that way. But, in terms of this episode, for some reason, I'm just feeling that it may not be the thing to do. So, all right. So, but I mean, that's not to say that I shouldn't continue talking with God, because it is important. Let's see. Okay. All right. When we talk to God, we want to have a conception of God that makes us feel good. We want to see God as a loving being, a God, who cares for us and has our best interest in mind. We want to be filled with awe, with reverence, with appreciation for all our blessings. So how we see God, I think, is important. Many years ago, a few thousand years ago, God was perhaps primarily, not sure, seen as very wrathful. If you did certain things wrong, that you deserved death. Vengeful God, jealous God, and I think that God still is our God, but I think over the last several millennia we've come to expand our understanding of God beyond that that God that we need to fear, not just be in awe of. So yeah, it's good to have a proper conception of God in mind. And that I think relates to enlightenment. I think, there's different definitions of enlightenment. I think we're all enlightened to a certain degree. I think as we become civilized, we learn how to read, write, communicate. That creates the conditions for greater and greater enlightenment, greater knowledge, greater interaction, communication. And then there's the meditation. So as we learn more about God, we become more enlightened in how we see God. And I think, yes, I think so. Like in my particular path, for the most part, I trust God, that God has my best interest in mind. But I think I also perhaps fear God, perhaps too much. Perhaps I don't, have a clear enough understanding that, for example, we were talking yesterday, I believe, of God sometimes telling us things either directly or through someone else that may not be accurate. And sometimes we have to understand that, well, this isn't God, maliciously trying to deceive us. This is really God trying to help us to discern right from wrong, accurate from inaccurate better. So it's good to have that conception of God in mind, that like when we have, let's say, not great days, like a not great day would be, we could see it as a punishment. So maybe we've been, why do we have not great days sometimes? Maybe we're too self-absorbed. Maybe we're not, considering others enough. Maybe we've done something wrong and we need, to feel a certain amount of suffering. Because I don't know if other people do this, but as part of my worldview and my understanding of God and my relationship to God is the idea that yes, when I begin to feel bad physically or emotionally, I will not just say, well, that's just, the way it is. I will, sometimes I notice that it's something like that other people are feeling also, like, for example, other people are feeling difficulty with this COVID distancing, but sometimes it's more individual. Sometimes it's, I recognize that it's not about something that's happening to everyone, something that's happening to me directly, more directly. And it's those times where I think it's wise. I've read, I believe, different rabbis, different teachers saying that, well, that's, when you're suffering, that's a signal that you should perhaps begin to look at what your life has been like over the last, few days, perhaps. Let's say it's just, very recent suffering. So, and that's a good approach, how, because for two reasons. One is like that to the extent that we look for reasons for why we may be suffering, that's how we refine our character, how we become better people. And the other part of that is like that, coupling that with seeing God as good, as on our side, as trying to help us, then we can try to find a lesson in the suffering. Now, a lot of times none will come, so we just simply would, during those instances, just shift back to a more happy mode. All right, so but this I want to pull this back more to God rather than our how we deal with suffering, how we interpret the events that surround our suffering and all. There's a word I want to talk about. There's one of the rabbis is giving a class next week on the concept of holiness, and which is, my understanding of the word holy, literally means separate. But, the connotation is much more than that. Like God is holy, the Sabbath is holy. So like, sometimes it's been described as the difference between the sacred and the profane. I'm not sure I'd go that far. I'm not sure I would say that what isn't holy is therefore profane. I want to look up the word profane again to see what, because it's a pejorative, and it seems that like, again, that we could be involved, let's say in the world, let's say on a weekday that's not the Sabbath, and it's not a holy day, but I think it would be mistaken to view God, or well, to view our existence during those times as profane. So, but with this concept of holiness, it's interesting because, like, let's try to figure it out. God, and it's interesting. I think there may be kind of a mistaken understanding of God that comes about through this idea of holiness, because like essentially when Abraham discovered God, it's like his conception was that God was somewhere out there. God was separate from him, separate from this world. Hence the word holy, transcendent perhaps, but I think a more accurate understanding is that not that God is holy in the sense of separate, but because God is everywhere. We can't escape that God is, every moment of our lives, God is here with us, and he's actually she is authoring the script, telling us exactly what to think, what to say, what to feel. So I think perhaps a more accurate understanding of holiness may be that it's not just, I think it's to immerse oneself and be immersed in, as with God, in greater virtue. I think, and virtue has a lot to do with happiness. That it's not an accident that on the Sabbath we're not supposed to do work. Because generally we associate work, even though sometimes we like work, with suffering, with discomfort, displeasure. So that's one component, but I think the other component is that of virtue. That when we're not, a lot of times when we're working, it could be a manifestation of greed. It could be that we have all we need, and so that our work represents kind of a greed on our part for more, more than we need. And so sometimes work takes on that I guess in this case, profane nature of not being virtuous, or it goes from being virtuous to not. So yeah, I think the proper understanding of holy would probably be more related to being immersed in virtue than to be separate. And I guess to bring it back to the common understanding, I think to be separate, is generally taken by probably the authors of the Bible as separate from the common person. Basically, the ancient Hebrews, the religious people of the past, they would work, they would strive to be better people. Back then people were doing some horrible things. I mean, even today people are doing some horrible things. But religious people would strive to be holy in the sense of separate from these common sins that were, again, commonplace back then. So, all right. So now, like, again, I'm aware that God has placed me in a position right now where, for whatever reason, she wants me to transition to a different topic. And the first topic that came to mind was, well, I just finished a topic and I don't know what to talk about next. So there's a feeling of anxiety, fear of humiliation, fear of like, oh my goodness, like I will be witnessed not knowing what I want to say. And which is interesting was like, many people, I would imagine, don't have a fear like that. They could be silent for 10, 15 minutes and that would be fine with them. And so, all right, so like, that's what God wanted me apparently to talk about. But now God is like, again, we have to always keep in mind that God is constantly feeding me either directly, and you, everyone, directly or indirectly, our thoughts, our feelings. So now God, after her having me introduce this new topic of discomfort, switching from one topic to the next, is now saying to me, all right, fine. So that's part of the topic, but now connected with me. God is saying, like, where am I in this? And so now the answer that comes is, because like an answer just happened to come. I could have been waiting there, much longer. Perhaps it wouldn't come, or maybe a different answer would come. But the answer that just came is that God is, that those moments are to experience and practice trust in God, trust that if an idea isn't coming to mind, it's because God believes it best that an idea doesn't come to mind. Okay, so we've got about 8 minutes left to go. I'm a little tired. Yeah, I definitely want to take a nap after this. And because I've got again, my class starts in a couple of hours, and if I were to go outside, then I definitely want to go out later, hopefully. All right, so let's now completely segue, because this has been kind of like personalized, individualized stuff. Let's just talk about God as the only being. To radically shift our perspective from there's an us and then there's a God. That relatively speaking, that's true in the sense that like there's us and we're kind of like God's hands. We're manifesting God's will, but we're not God. In other words, it's like we're the body of God. We're not the mind of God. The mind of God controls the body of God. So, yeah, this idea that not just that God is everything, but God is the only thing. And this is an idea that I'm cultivating, that I'm basically expanding, because there are derivations that come from this, extrapolations that if God is everything, God is the only thing. If God is the only thing, then this reality is like God's imagination. And so let's say we're to consider, well, all right, where was I before I was born? Where will I be? Where will we all be when we die? And based on these previous understandings, it seems reasonable to conclude that, well, we have always existed in God's mind, in God's imagination. I think an imagination is a good word, because, like, for example, an author may create an entire novel from their imagination. The world lives within their mind. And so I think our world lives within God's mind. So that means that, and the other part of it is, like, if God is everything, as God is, then God has to know everything. That means that not only does God know everything in the present, God knows everything that happened in the past, and he just doesn't ever forget anything, and knows everything that will happen in the future. So again, to just make that understanding more practical, if we apply it to what we believe happens after we die, or what we believe happened before we were born, it just simplifies everything. We existed within God's mind, just like we exist now. Okay, so about less than 5 minutes. Yeah, I'm going through a period of change in my life, and I think this series is contributing to it. I think it's a positive change. It's a challenging change, some of which I'm choosing not to, or God is just not allowing me to share right now. I think that's a more accurate way of saying it. But I guess I think I want to reiterate that this practice of 5 times a week striving to talk about God as much as possible is a very good exercise. It just like helps us to maintain our focus in the best way. Sometimes, yeah, if we're involved in some intricate work that demands our attention, reading something, writing something, doing something that involves focus, then yes, we can't during those times as completely and directly, keep God in mind, focus on God. But even then, I suppose that to the extent we're doing whatever we're doing, and we kind of like remind ourselves of God's presence, God's working God's will through us, it has to change the nature of the experience. It has to kind of like elevate it, just dignify it, make it more divine, ennoble it. So, all right, well, let's see. Yeah, so now I'm thinking I've got like almost 3 minutes left. So God is now having me think that, well, I've got a list of topics, and I might want to refine the list, just like go over it again and just like add some more topics. Because I mean, I'm guessing that as this show evolves, I don't mind repeating certain concepts over and over, like, the necessity for God to exist. But I think another dynamic that's happening is that as I do more and more episodes, I'm changing. As I'm changing, the kinds of topics that I talked about in the past are perhaps not necessary to be talked about or as much, or what I've talked about in the past has led me to a certain level that I can talk about things that I'm not so familiar with, to rather than solidify, my learning to advance to higher levels of understanding and closeness to God. And naturally, this would be reflected in your viewing, that, if you're following my thoughts, you're essentially, having this experience, which is interesting, because this is God kind of like, if you're listening to me, it's really God feeding you thoughts through me. The thoughts you're thinking right now are really what I'm saying. You're having thoughts about what I'm saying, but to a great extent, you're listening, you're paying attention, is really having these same thoughts. You're understanding them. You may be understanding them somewhat differently, but that it's just very cool to understand that that's all God talking to you through me. And we all do this. God uses us all for that. All right, so that's all we have time for tonight. Thanks for watching. Catch this every Monday through Friday at 5 p.m. on White Plains Community Media Channel 76 if you get Optimum, 45 if you get Verizon. The episodes are also on YouTube. And yeah, it's going to be interesting to see, because like God sometimes has me fear doing episodes, because I'm afraid of like not knowing what to say, not coming across as well as I'd like. But it's a good exercise to break through that discomfort, to kind of like be comfortable with it, and to trust God. So again, I'm not sure where God is going to lead me, where God is going to lead us next, but we will find out soon enough. Thanks for watching, and God willing, I'll see you soon.